So, good evening and welcome. I would like to thank, in the name of Instituto Cervantes and on behalf of our director, Mr. Oscar Puyol and the Embassy of Spain, Indian International Center for its continued support for celebrating this festival and this roundtable. And I also would like to thank our wonderful panelists, Dr. Nebuti Dugal and Mr. Murtaza Ali Khan, and also our wonderful moderator, Panalistin, and all of you for coming here today. It is heartwarming to see how Indian people show their interest and in some cases even their passion for Spanish culture, and in this case for Spanish cinema. Spanish Embassy and Instituto Cervantes, our director and myself, we really understand the spread of our culture in a way where we integrate local communities and local people. And I was last December in the National Museum of Indian Cinema, and we had also a round table with, I'm sure you are going to know this name. I was there with Shyam Benegal, and I was there also with Nirja Sikar, that is the additional secretary of the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting. And we were talking about Carlos Saura, but we talked about how you have to find the links between, both cinemas and both culture, and how you have to find local people who are interesting, and at the end they are representative of Spain. Talking, as we are having here today, we have Beruti talking about our iconic Spanish director, and we have here Murtaza also talking about that. So, I really have to thank them and also the audience, because you are living here, and maybe you will talk with your friends or with your family, and you will say, this wonderful director or this wonderful movie, which you should watch it. So thanks so much for your support, and I hope you will enjoy and learn from this roundtable. So thank you so much for coming, and I'm just giving the floor to our moderator, Palagi.
Thank you, Alejandro. I'm going to switch this on now. Can everyone hear me? Yes. So thank you all for coming and braving the heat to be here. I'm going to quickly introduce our panelists here. First, we have Mr. Murtaza Ali Khan. He is an independent film critic and journalist who has been covering art, culture and entertainment for over 10 years now. Mr. Khan regularly appears on radio and TV as a film expert, including on the DD Morning Show every Thursday on DD National, where he makes his weekly recommendations. Mr. Khan has also curated film festivals and retrospectives for various embassies and cultural centers. Of course, Instituto Cervantes is one of them. He has also served on the jury of various film festivals as well as the National Film Awards. He regularly conducts workshops on film history, and he has translated the book Hindujas and Bollywood, about the global journey of over 1,200 Hindi films from 1950s to 1980s into English. His education spans science and technology, mass communication and management. He's always looking for content that not just entertains the viewer, but also encourages them to think and question more often. For when the audiences do not evolve, the content creators too tend to get lazy and resort to formulaic methods instead of constantly trying to push the boundaries. He tweets at @Murtaza Critic, if anyone wants to follow him.
Thank you so much.
And then we have, of course, Mr. Alejandro Palma Alibus, I should say correctly.
That's perfect.
Mr. Alejandro is the administrator of Instituto Cervantes of New Delhi since June 2023. He is a double master's in law and business administration from the University of Pablo de Olavide at Sevilla, Spain. He also has a master's in public procurement by Instituto Universitario Gutierrez Mellado, Ministry of Defense in Spain. He has lived in France, where he attended the Université du Littoral, Côte d'Opale, if I'm not wrong, sorry about my French, excuse my French, literally, during his master's studies and England, Bristol and London, where he worked in a consultancy before joining the Spanish Navy as an officer. He has worked 6 years in the Spanish Navy headquarters in Madrid. Apart from his experience in Cervantes, he has collaborated in several cultural projects in Spain and the UK. Culture and world heritage have always been one of his passions and hobbies. From exhibitions to cinema, gastronomy, music, etc., he has been part of many, many cultural events. And of course, today here as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bharat.
Then we have Dr. Vibhuti Duggal. Dr. Vibhuti Duggal teaches film studies at the School of Culture and Creative Expressions, Ambedkar University, Delhi. She was awarded her PhD in Cinema Studies from the School of Arts and Aesthetics, Jawaharlal Nehru University, on a CSDS-ICSSR Doctoral Sports Fellowship. I'm not sure the full form of that, what that may be, but
Center for the Study of Developing Societies and the Indian Council for Social Science Research.
Brilliant and very, very intelligent. Right. She serves as an associate editor for the journal Bioscope, South Asian Screen Studies. Most recently, she has co-edited a special section, Empire and the Census, Case Studies from Late Colonial India for South Asia, Journal of South Asian Studies 2021, Film Studies and Introduction 2022, and Punjab Sounds in and Beyond the Region, which is forthcoming. She is currently working on her book manuscript on cinema-oriented listening cultures in India. That's a lot of intellect inside one conference room, right? So on that note, after those heavy introductions, I'd like to just begin by asking Mr. Murtaza first, what was your thought behind creating this kind of, a festival for Indian audiences, specifically at this time of the year, and selecting the movies that you selected? What was the thought behind that, if you could?
Well, first of all, I would like to thank, Instituto Cervantes, of course, for taking this initiative, and of course for IIC for organizing this very, very special film festival. I must also tell you that Spain is a very, very special country in many ways.
Right.
A lot of other countries in Europe, who came to India, the British came to India, the French came to India, the Portuguese came to India, and they went on to become a colonial masters. So we share a colonial hangover, so to say, with a lot of these countries. But Spain actually never chose to come to India as colonial masters. They actually went on the other side of the world and conquered, the other side of the world, so to say, the Americas and other places. So in that way, Spanish cinema, particularly, beyond one or two names, those names are not as well known in India as they are probably in other parts of the world. And with this thought, this festival came into fruition. The idea was to bring some of the biggest masters of Spanish cinema beyond the ones that are already known in India. I think everybody knows about Pedro Almodovar, and I've been to so many of Pedro Almodovar screenings in Delhi and in India, and people know a lot about his films, and he's a popular name. And of course, there's another master of Spanish cinema who is still very well known in India, and that happens to be Luis Buñuel. But beyond Buñuel and beyond Pedro Almodovar, not much is known. So we thought that why not bring more such masters, icons and masters. That's the name, We want to celebrate their works, we want to celebrate their legacy. So that was the starting note of this entire dialogue, entire film festival. And that's when, the moment you talk about Spanish masters, you talk about Spanish icons, you have to think of, some of these names. Luis Garcia Berlanga is a very important name, and that's why we have a Berlanga film, which is Welcome Mr. Marshall, which will be screened day after here at IIC. Another important name is that of, Antonio Bardem, a very important filmmaker who started in the 50s. He co-wrote, Welcome Mr. Marshall with Berlanga. And his film, Death of a Cyclist, is a very important socio-realistic drama, which will be screened tomorrow at IIC as part of this festival. And then, to go beyond that, there is Carlos Saura. Why Carlos Saura is important? Because he acts as a bridge between these two different generations. If I take you to the 30s or late 20s, when Luis Buñuel and Salvador Dali. For those of you who do not know Dali, Dali is a great surrealist. And Dali, for a common Indian, is that face on Money Heist mask. The one with the curved mustaches and that. So he was a master surrealist. A lot of you would not know that JRD Tata for Air India actually got special ashtrays designed by Salvador Dali.
Oh, wow.
So he remains a very important pioneering figure, in the whole world of arts, and he's one of the prominent figures in the field of surrealism. He collaborated with Luis Buñuel on a very important short film with the great American film critic Roger Ebert has regarded as the greatest and the most important short film ever made, Anshi and Andalou, in 1929. So Buñuel started in the 1920s and he became this seminal figure, though he was never in Spain for very long because Spain, after the Spanish Civil War, was under the grasp of this fascist Francoist regime. And a lot of the filmmakers at the time chose to live outside of Spain. For example, Buñuel chose to settle in Mexico. And others were also, finding ways of, because it was not really a very conducive environment for creative thinking and filmmaking particularly. Because Franco's regime insisted that only make religious-centric films, only make, very one-dimensional films. They were not very open to ideas that somebody like a Luis Buñuel, a master surrealist, and who was always questioning religion, who was always critiquing organized fate, as you would see in his masterpiece, Verdenia, which we have for you next week. When I say why Carlos Saura is important, is because he comes from the next generation. So it's the generation of Luis Buñuel and Dali, if I can say so. And then they were working mostly out of Spain and making films that inspired some of the filmmakers, young storytellers in Spain. They took inspiration from Buñuel, the likes of Berlanga and Bardem, and they started making their own films. Films like Welcome Mr. Marshall, which you would see, films like Death of a Cyclist, films like The Executioner. And Berlanga was a master of using satire. And the fact that he was using satire all the time, he was able to escape the censorship of the Francoist regime. In fact, once one of the ministers of Franco told him that, he's really a communist because he's always criticizing Spain. So Franco famously said that he's not a communist, he's something worse. He's a bad Spaniard. So Berlanga's humor saved him in many ways, though he still had a lot of issues. But the other one was Antonio Bardem, who never chose humor, and his films were very direct, as you would see in a film like Death of a Bicyclist. So, and he was also a devout communist, and the Franco regime put him in jail. So this was a very difficult time, but these were the brave hearts. They were the people who had the courage to actually take up challenge, and they actually were going through a very difficult time. But inspired by Buñuel and what that generation achieved, they really paved the platform for the upcoming generation of Spanish filmmakers. And in that generation came people like Carlos Saura, who were so popular in the international circles. And then, of course, his leading lady was Geraldine Chaplin, Charlie Chaplin's daughter. So all that helped him to make films which were very internationally relevant. His distributors were spread all across the globe. So Franco never wanted to, mess up with somebody like Carlos Saura, because that would have given him very bad international press. So, but you have to understand that they went through the 50s, which was really the toughest time. So hats off to Berlanga and hats off to Bardem, for really setting it up. So this is the basic idea, and in that I'll also put in somebody like a Fernando Gomez, who was a novelist, who was a very well-established actor, and he also made some interesting films. One of them we are showing, which is the closing film of this festival, which is Voyage to Nowhere. And of course, there's Luis Buñuel, and then we also included a modern master like Julio Medem, whose film, Sex and Lucia, opened this festival. So that's the entire thought and idea why we chose these 6 masters, because we wanted to bring Spain to India like it has never come, through cinema, and through the works of these 6 masters who are mostly, unknown, to an average cinephile in India. So it was like a very well thought out festival. It was also like a primer, because these filmmakers are so huge, their body of works are so important that one film is just not enough. So this is just like a curtain raiser, a sort of a primer for what the future may have in store. And I think I really hope that Mr. Alejandro, Oscar Puyol, and Cervantes, Instituto Cervantes, they really bring full-fledged festivals of each of these art forms. I think India would really like that. Indian cinephile and every Indian cinephile would really enrichen their experience by watching more of these films by these masters.
Wow. I think his middle name is Murtaza Movie Ali Khan. Just look at him speak about cinema so passionately. Just of course, I know you had like a well thought out, trajectory to it. Apart from Netflix views and that fun fact you just told us, and fancy ashtrays of Air India, which I'm sure if you have traveled, we may have collected. Of course, Indians love to just take home things which are complimentary. Apart from that, what do you think is the actual real legacy of these directors that you spoke so fondly of, and of course you think are one of their kind and need to have their own sort of, festivals full-fledged?
I think most of these filmmakers, they were working at a time when Spain was going through a very tough time in terms of censorship. So one legacy is that these filmmakers taught the world that how you can tell stories that you want to tell, facing the most atrocious censorship. I think today we see that happening in Iran all the time. We see that happening in a lot of these countries where there is no democracy, or there is only democracy in the name. I think a Valanga, a Buñuel, a Bardem, and all these people, they really set the platform for the new generation of storytellers, giving them the courage that yes, it can be done. Okay, if you cannot do it, in a straightforward way, then you can use humor, you can use satire, you can use other ways, but you have to tell the stories that you want to tell. And I think that's their greatest legacy. And Pallavi, I also have to leave a little early. I'm really sorry, and I would have loved to continue, but today I have to go. But I'll be back, for the rest of the screenings. And if, of course, there are no official introductions, as per a schedule. But if anybody is looking for any off the screen, any offline discussions, then I will be available throughout the course of this festival. And I can be reached out at my Twitter handle, Murtaza Critic, and which is now X, or you can email me at murtaza.jmi@gmail.com. If you have any questions, if you have any queries, I'll be more than happy to get back. Thank you so much.
Thank you, muchas gracias. Right, so on that note, I'll move on to Mr. Alejandro. And thanks for joining us today. I'll ask you firstly, we in all our cultures across the world, we have directors who actually sort of, mean something to their own esoteric population. For example, Yash Johar for us means, chiffon saris and snow-clad mountains and the heroines in their, brilliant makeup, dancing and all of that. And of course we have Mr. Yash Chopra ji, who obviously gave us the sort of idea of romance and whatnot. So my question to you is, what do these directors actually mean to you and to your people and to Spanish population in general? What would you say? What would be your answer?
Yeah, I would say, as Mr. Murtaza Ali mentioned, those directors were really brave, because in a really difficult political situation where the censorship was, a daily basis, they were able to talk and to make social criticism through their movies. And that had an impact, and that influenced not just other directors, but also the population of Spain. So they gave the tools to make people change maybe their thought, or to make people realize another point of view, to make people brave enough like them to talk about where things were wrong, or what we should change as a society. So, the impact of them, when we talk about the influence on director, we always, used to talk about the impact of them on terms of other directors, but it's really important the influence and the contribution of them to how the society evolves. So in Spain, they helped us and they told us, don't be scared, if you don't believe in the same God that the rulers, you don't have to be ashamed of that. If you have another point of view, don't be afraid to speak out. So for sure, they help us also to evolve into the democracy that we have later.
Right. What a pivotal point, and also I feel like something like this is sort of relevant through and through, which connects Are they really old in the sort of stories they're telling, in the kind of stories they're telling? Or could we just look at them and have enough themes, connect them with their truth in that moment to our contemporary present today? What would you say?
You know, you have to be realistic. The movies are old, but the stories are not. So they have different outfits, or they have a different way of speaking, because for sure 70 years ago people don't speak the same way they do today, and the scenario was different, but the stories are so modern. You know, for that reason those films are still successful, because you can see a parallelism with real situation that we are facing today. So when you watch Viridiana, and you have seen like the huge differences between social classes, you know, you have the lord, the person that belongs to the nobility, and the servants. And nowadays you see that gap into our society. You know, when you see Viridiana also, you see the influence of religion in the lower and upper class, both. When you watch Death of a Cyclist, you see also, again, that social class different, but you see also how many times when you are powerful and you have money, you don't have to face the consequences of your actions. And that happened today. You know, I was watching like 1 or 2 months ago White Tiger, an Indian movie, and the story is quite similar to Death of a Cyclist. You know, a woman for upper class driving, running over someone, don't paying the assistance that they require, and then they will face for the mental problem, because you have to face that you kill someone, but the legal consequences are not going to be the same. But you know, there are 70 years of differences between those two movies, and there are two different cultures involved, Indian and Spanish cinema, and the stories are more or less the same. You know, the core of the story is the same, with different, yeah, as I say, with different outfits, way of speaking, etc. So yeah, I would say that some of those movies are all movies, black and white, but not all stories. So those people that are maybe reluctant to watch those kind of movies, I would recommend them to give it a chance, because I'm pretty sure that they are going to be surprised.
Wow. Now, speaking of course, the social classes, and of course, I mean, it's no secret, we have colorism in our society, we have the caste system in our society, we are very, very socio-economically divided, we have like 1,000 layers between, you know, someone at the bottom of the pyramid to someone who is at the top of it. So my question to you next is just, I'll keep it really short, this is my last question to him, of course, as well. What would you say would be the cultural elements which you would find as a cinema goer, or as someone who has obviously lived here for a while, has been here for exactly 1 year now, June 2023 to 2024, what would you say would be the similarities of, say, lifestyle or culture between Spain and India, or just the population or the way we think, or just as a cinema goer? What would you say?
You know, we oftenly think that cultures are so different and that we are so far, that we have a barrier between us, but if you scratch a little bit that wall, there are no that big gap. There are many parallelism between both culture and both cinemas, the stories that you are telling, and there are also many similarities. When you, for example, I talked before about this of cyclists and White Tiger, and you know, there is a part of the storytelling that is similar, but for example, when you watch Welcome Mr. Marshall, you know, by Luis García Belanger, this was a movie from 1953. When you watch that, you see how this director, and Mr. Murtaza Ali can talk about this, how this director used ironic humor, how this director used satire to face social problems. And again, I was watching another movie like a few weeks ago that is called Lapata Ladies. And you see that satiric humor to face traditions and to face situations. And you never know if there is, I mean, for sure there is a parallelism or a similar perspective to treat different different topics. So, you know, at the end, it's not that far our movies. When you watch Sex and Lucia, and you see the pain for the loss of a true love, you know, how Lucia left the town and moved to another place. And I was watching my son here in India, and the boy left the town, and he had this loss also of his true love. So at the end, you see pattern, you know, you see stories that are very similar in many different cultures, in the cinemas from different countries, because at the end, human beings are not that different, you know. And also, sometimes it's not just a question of similarities between movies or parallelism or same perspective, but also sometimes you find that some directors make productions that are linked to India in a certain way. And again, we come to Carlos Saura. Carlos Saura made, he made 3 movies, Carmen, Amor Brujo. Amor Brujo is like witch love, and Bodas de Sangre, bleeding weddings. Those is the, we call trilogy of flamenco of Carlos Saura. And he made the production Flamenco India, because the root of flamenco comes from India. The root of flamenco comes from gypsy people, and gypsy people come from Rajasthan, because they move with the silk, you know, silk road to Europe. And he made this production trying to find parallelism between Indian music and flamenco, or Indian dresses and flamenco dressing. So sometimes we are making something, or we are having something that we believe that is 100% Spanish, and it's not that. It's more Indian than we believe, or can be more Russian, or whatever, you know. So for sure, I think that when Indian people will watch Spanish movie, they will find that we are quite close. You know, the importance of families in Spain is really, I mean, it is a major issue for us. We are really close to our families, like Indian people. The importance of food, you know, we are always eating, we are always surrounding the table and sharing lunch and meal with our families. So the importance also of like religion and
spirituality.
Sorry, I cannot pronounce it, but yeah, the importance of that for us too. We are Catholics, or I mean nowadays mainly Catholic, but you also have Muslim people in Spain, and that is also really important in Indian tradition. So at the end, we are we are so far in terms of lands, but we are not that far in terms of culture.
Wow, even what an answer. And speaking of food, I think I remember from my Spanish learning days the word la sobremesa, which is after you eat, you're just sitting because you haven't yet digested it and you're not ready to just get up and do your things. So you just lounge. Am I right with that?
Yeah.
So unfortunately, no la sobremesa today because lack of funds. But apart from that, just very, very interesting points put up right there. Thank you so much for your inputs and insights.
Thank you.
Those were really good answers. And if anyone has any Netflix recommendations for him, he's clearly watching our movies and good movies at that. So if anyone wants to recommend movies to him, please feel free. On that note, I'm going to go to Dr. Vibhuti, and she has prepared for us a very interesting and insightful presentation. She's worked very hard on it, so please pay attention. And she's a professor, so yeah, pay attention. Thank you. Sure.
Sorry, can you hear me? Yes. Oh, perfect. So first disclaimer, yes, unfortunately or fortunately, I do profess to teaching, and cinema is what I teach, but not Buñuel. Well, I do teach Buñuel actually, but unfortunately, it is one of the classic master moments. It is Ocean that we end up teaching because surrealism. And so it is on that note that I decided I would do a little bit of show and tell today, just because it's boring to hear me talk. So at least you can watch something. So what I'm going to try and tackle is one of the most well-known masters of Spanish cinema, which is Buñuel, but I'm going to perhaps look at Buñuel through some of his traces, to sort of perhaps remind all of us that, as you know, Pallavi was asking what happens to their influences and are they still relevant today, that they may actually not be as far away from us as we thought. So there are three things that I'm going to sort of quickly try and point out. I will try and keep this really short. One is, of course, what are the most classic surrealist influences of Buñuel, so dream sequences and so on and so forth. The second is the figure of the child. Buñuel produces the figure of the child in a very, very interesting and very powerful way for cinema, and also the city street. All the way from Ocean Blue onward, it's something that Buñuel has. I'm actually going to do this through a film that is one of his most well-known from his Mexican period, which Murtaza spoke about a little while ago, which is a film known as Los Olvidados, The Forgotten Ones, or otherwise it's often also translated as The Young and the Damned. This film has a long, long legacy. It wins him, of course, the Best Director Award at Cannes in 1951. And of course, it's also the inspiration for those of you who've seen Salam Bombay by Meera Nair. Meera Nair talks about it in her journal as being one of the chief inspirations for that particular film. Importantly, and here's what's interesting about Los Olvidados is that Buñuel's politics, which we have so far not touched upon, reside front and center in that film. Not only does he draw on Italian neorealism and provide a very, very strong socialist critique, the reason why he wasn't around for the Franco years in Spain, could have been being equally arrested or likely may not have seen the kind of cinema from him that we did if he'd been around. But he takes that, and so Los Olvidados really carries that with him, with it in the film in a very, very strong way. And nevertheless, even as he sort of draws from these tremendous realist influences and this very strong socialist critique, he doesn't leave behind his early days and sort of that the heady experimentation of Paris, which allowed him to sort of make Ocean Blue and other films. So he retains that sort of element of the surreal. So this is a still from one of the films. I'll just move to this sequence itself that it's from. This is from Los Olvidados. This is when one of the main protagonists from the street. The film is about teenage crimes. These are young boys, mostly anywhere between age 12 and upward, living on the street, sort of mingling there and so on and so forth. So it takes in a lot of surrealist influences. There are dream sequences. This becomes, in later filmmakers, it becomes fantastical creatures. It can, allows for jumps across time and space, allows for the horrific in terms of the imagination come through, a lot of distortions and so on appear. So if I may just quickly show all of you. So from one dream sequence to another, and also sort of keeping in Spain, but now Spain not within the country of Spain, but keeping with Spanish as it moves to other parts of the world, right? So if that is Buñuel in Mexico, and this is a still from a Brazilian filmmaker. It's sort of moving from Spanish onto Portuguese-speaking spaces, but within the broader realm of Latin American cinema. This is Hector Barretos Pichot, which takes up actually much of Buñuel. And so this is a dream sequence. This is similar plotline to Buñuel's Los Olvidados, Pichot's story. But what Pichot does is to follow the character called Pichot. Again, a young boy turning to crime on the streets of correctly. Sorry, forgotten the name of the city. I think it's Sao Paulo. Yeah, you're right. On the streets of Sao Paulo, and from there, this particular dream sequence, when he imagines himself running on the street, follows a moment where he's seen sniffing glue. Right, so sniffing of the glue becomes a way of entering into this hallucinatory maze. So there's constantly this rap against what the child is being able to do or not being able to do, and what the street affords or doesn't afford, and how that finds register only through this absolutely blurry, surrealistic tone in imagination. Right. The next thing that I'm going to kind of move to again is move away from Brazil and back to Mexico. In that sense, and to go back to the work of Guillermo del Toro. And this is from some of his early work. This is his pre-Hollywood, pre-Hellboy 2 moment. It's the part where I give up on Del Toro. This is a very, very interesting film. Again, of course, with Del Toro has an acknowledged debt to Buñuel, right? And his influence is something that he holds on to. But also, he's someone who draws particularly on Buñuel's the surrealism, the use of dream sequences, the use of the fantastical creatures, whether it's Pan's Labyrinth, whether it's The Devil's Backbone, a very, very strong sense of social critique, and constantly again return to the moment of the war, right? In Pan's Labyrinth, it's again the Spanish Civil War, which he returns to. And once more, of course, the figure of the child running across much of Del Toro's work. And he's also very interested in his most recent film was an animated version of Pinocchio. A retelling of Pinocchio in animation. So there was actually a fairly interesting story. So it's very curiously working around certain kinds of generic conventions around the child and children's, so-called children's fiction. So of course, little hat tip off to Rossellini too. This is, again, it's still from a sequence that I'd like to show. It's really short, like 1 minute, where the child in this case starts talking to the bomb. And that's the bomb right next to it. I just want to make sure the, sorry. So actually, between the sort of two moments, one of the things you can see is sort of this kind of continuity, where I see the continuity or the trace of Buñuel existing in these fantastical figures, these ghostly apparitions that appear, the transformation of dream sequences. He's searching for Santi, he's talking to the bomb. Santi is his old friend. In that process, then, he suddenly finds himself. And the last thing that I wanted to sort of draw our attention to in terms of continuity was, this is again a screenshot from the early, screen grab from the early part of Los Olvidados, which opens out and tells us this is Mexico City. Right? It gives us really a bird's eye view of the city. And that kind of an imagination, that sprawl, in which then these sort of tiny accidents, these lives are lived out constantly, sort of engaging with crime. How do you sort of move from this kind of stately grandeur of the city to the lives of those who live on the streets? And that's a juxtaposition that, again, keeping with Buñuel and how he wanted to see, is something that continues. And this is something that, again, this is still, again, it's a screen grab from Babenco's We Should. But again, sort of just the frame tells you, the visual similarity of the frame tells you how easily that imagination has sort of lived on. And finally, if I may leave you with Raymond Dognat's words on Buñuel's Los Olvidados. Buñuel's tragedy has a curious way with pity. He refuses to indulge it. Instead, the atrocious and the derisory, treated with caustic lucidity, stun it just as they stun revulsion. On that note, thank you very much for bearing with me. I'll pause there.
Thank you so much all for coming. I hope you enjoyed our little panel discussion. We didn't want to make it very long because, but thank you so much for braving the heat and actually showing up. If you have any feedback or any questions?
I would like just to add something really quickly. As Mr. Murtaza Ali can say and explain really well, at the end when you plan a festival, you have to set some limits to select the directors. And we made this selection. They're much more iconic Spanish director that I would recommend you. Almodovar, for sure. We have Alex de la Iglesia, we have Fernando Trueba, we have Juan Antonio Bayona, that is not really well known, his name, but his movies are really well known. He's been directing Jurassic Park, what is the name? Fallen Kingdom. He has been directed The Impossible, Society of Snow, that last year was a really successful movie, and he has been also in Oscars, The Orphanage. So we have also Garci, Jose Luis Garci. So I'm expecting to, as he proposed, and I'm sure that many of you are expecting that also from our Spanish Cultural Center, from Instituto Cervantes. We are expecting to do in the future much more Spanish festival, focusing on this and other directors, and I hope you will enjoy it and you will discover just a tiny part of our cinema, okay? So thank you.
Also Spirit of the Beehive.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, you only made 3 or 4, right?
Spain,
yeah. And else you,
Landmark.
which you made. You just made 3 features or something,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
A documentary or 2.
And that's a take on this Franco.
Yeah.
This Frankenstein was Franco.
You know that I read that Buñuel in his memories said that when he launched Viridiana, in the beginning it was well accepted in Spain, but the Vaticano started to he present into the government and say, this movie shouldn't be allowed because they are talking about some topics that are, they are also talking about religions. And Franco asked to one of his assistants to watch the movie, and he watched the movie, and he said, I'm not quite surprised. I like it, but at the end,
he lost his job.
yeah, those peoples and Beruti and also Murtaza can talk about it. Those guys were visionary and they were doing new things. And in the beginning, everything new, power and people reject that. But those guys are really gifted guys. And we have to say, and they were talking about topics 70 years ago that nowadays we are dealing with. So I'm pretty sure that you will love, you are in knowledge of their words, but if you are not, I will invite you to continue watching the Spanish cinema, okay?